I used to think hell only existed in the Bible. But no, I lived in it, for the first 18 years of my life. And the devil took the form of a younger brother, with a fake smile and the kind of eyes my mother always called angel. If anyone ever asked me why I don't believe in the idea that family is where you belong, this is my answer. There's nothing scarier than a family that knows how to hide cruelty under a mask of love. Especially when you're the only one in the house seen as a burden. I was the eldest child in a middle-class family in Wisconsin, USA. I was born 3 years before Levi, my younger brother, but from the day he cried for the first time, I became a shadow in my own home. My mother always said Levi was sensitive and needed special attention. Every time he cried, whether from tripping or breaking his own toys and blaming me, I was dragged into the living room to have a talk. In my house, having a talk meant my mother would scream until her throat was raw, while I stood there, hands clenched, trying not to cry. Levi was a master manipulator. He knew how to cry on cue, when to bow his head and fake remorse, and most importantly, he knew exactly who was backing him. I still remember clearly my 12th birthday. Levi deliberately ruined the custom birthday cake my mom had ordered. When I screamed in frustration, my mom didn't ask what happened. She just slapped me and coldly said, "You're a big girl now, don't be so selfish, your brother's still little." Things like that happened so often I stopped being surprised. I used to have a cat named Ginger, the only little soul in the house I ever felt close to. And one afternoon, I came home from school to find Ginger locked inside the washing machine. She was alive, but so terrified she wouldn't come near anyone anymore. "I knew who did it," Levi giggled while I cried, and when I screamed that he was a monster, my mother stepped in front of him and growled, "If you say something like that again, I'll send you to juvenile detention." My father, he didn't say a word. He was there in the house, but almost invisible. The way he shrugged, turned on the TV, and walked away while I begged to be heard. Hurt more than any slap. To him, Levi was the son he always wanted. I was just the troublesome daughter. I learned to stay silent at 13. I stopped telling anyone about what Levi did to me at school, I hid my journals under the mattress, and I started staying up late just to avoid spending time in the living room with everyone else. Levi only got worse as he grew older. He smashed my phone because he didn't like the case color, told his friends I was a weirdo who talked to herself, and worst of all, he dated my best friend. And, when she chose to believe his sweet lies over 5 years of friendship, I realized, to most people, I'd always be the one easiest to leave behind. I'm not sure when I started to hate Levi, but I remember exactly when I started to hate myself. It was the night I begged my mother not to hit me for breaking a vase, even though it was Levi who kicked it over during a tantrum. My mother stood in the middle of the house, holding a broom, and said, "If you won't take responsibility, then don't bother eating dinner." I went to bed hungry. Levi got 2 servings because he's growing. I knew I had to escape that place, but how do you escape when the whole world thinks you live in a perfect family? I didn't think life could get worse than being the leftover in your own home. Then came 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across America like a never-ending nightmare. And I, like millions of others, became a victim of a free fall. When the flower shop I'd worked at for 6 years was forced to close indefinitely, I naively thought, just a few weeks. But weeks turned into months. My boss sent a short email, terminated my contract without notice, and just like that, I lost my only source of income. I was 28, no savings, no house. My roommate moved back in with her parents in Minnesota, and I stood in an empty apartment in Milwaukee, listening to the faint hum of the fridge, like the final breath of a stable life. I sold everything I could, my desk, printer, the rare book collection I'd treasured since high school. Eventually, all I had left were a few clothes, a backpack of personal items, and the old camper I'd bought last year. To try camping and feel free. Ironically, it became the only place I had left to call home. I remember clearly the day I called my mom, my voice trembling like a lost child. "Mom, can I park my camper in your driveway for a little while? I don't need to come inside, it's just, I have nowhere else to go." There was silence on the other end, then her tired sigh. "Amelia, you're an adult now and still can't take care of yourself? We don't have space. Don't be a burden." I swallowed hard. "It's just parking, Mom, it won't cost you anything." She laughed, cold as ice. "Parking? That piece of mobile trash, the neighbors will think we're housing a homeless person." "Don't embarrass me." I don't know what hurt more, the rejection or the disgust in her laugh. Probably both. I hung up, gripping the steering wheel like I could crush something, but there was nothing to crush except my own heart. Levi, of course, didn't miss the chance to twist the knife. He texted me a selfie of the whole family. Him, Sil his wife, and their twin kids having dinner. In the photo, scribbled on the chalkboard behind them were the words, "Family dinner. Where people of value belong." Right below was the message. "Looks like the camper's gonna be your new best friend, congrats." That night, I crawled into the camper, parked temporarily in a Walmart lot, and pulled the curtains tight like the world outside was a wild animal waiting to tear me apart. I had never known a night so long, so cold, and so empty. The wind howled through the cracks, unfamiliar footsteps echoed outside, and loneliness filled the space like water flooding a sinking apartment. I couldn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because the shame was too heavy, eating away at me like termites hollowing wood from the inside out. The next day, I began the life of an urban ghost, moving from one parking lot to another, avoiding security guards, hiding my existence like I was a criminal. To get electricity, I had to secretly run a cable from an old gas station nearby. To shower, I asked for guest passes at cheap gyms. And to stay sane, I taped a piece of paper with a scribbled message on the camper wall. "This is only temporary." But temporary lasted 7 months. I had never felt so small. No one called, no one asked. Not a single person from my family texted, not even to check in. To them, I had disappeared, and they were fine with that. If you ever asked me why I didn't go back, this is why. When you fall into the deepest hole of your life, the first person to kick you isn't society. It's the people who call themselves family. There were mornings I woke up in the old camper, drenched in sweat from the suffocating summer heat, my throat dry and my head spinning after a restless night in a parking lot. There were winter nights I wrapped myself in 2 layers of old blankets, clutching a hot water bottle like it was the only warm thing left in a freezing life. Survival. That was all I thought about for nearly half a year. No dreams, no hopes, just survive. I learned how to secretly plug into outside outlets behind quiet stores, only charging for 3 hours at a time to avoid getting caught. I carefully found gyms with 7-day free trial policies and used different names and emails to stretch out my access to showers. I memorized which parking lots had the least patrolling at night. Which public restrooms stayed clean after 9 p.m. I became a shadow drifting through the city I once proudly called home. Now, I was just a 28-year-old woman with no money, no family, and no hope. But in the middle of all that ash, a small spark began to glow. I stumbled across a job posting taped to the window of a small print company in the suburbs of Waukesha. Position: warehouse assistant, lifting, inventory, document delivery. I walked in wearing a faded jacket, a gaunt face, and dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights. The receptionist looked me up and down, frowned, and then called the manager. 3 days later, I started working. The pay was low, the shifts were 10 hours long, and my legs felt like they were being crushed after each shift. But I didn't complain. I arrived early, worked hard, and always volunteered for extra tasks. I cleaned the warehouse, mopped the floors, even patched up a jammed loading door using scraps of wood I found at a junkyard. One afternoon, Mr. Paul, the warehouse supervisor, caught me hauling boxes after hours. He frowned. "What are you still doing here?" I told him the truth. About the camper. About how I was living behind a truck. About sleeping behind Walmart lots, like a sun-faring rat. He didn't say a word, just nodded and walked away. The next morning, I was called into the office. I thought I was getting fired. But no. Mr. Paul had asked the director for permission to let me park my camper behind the company lot, near the warehouse, where it was under surveillance and had access to a power outlet. I almost burst into tears on the spot. From that day forward, I had a stable parking spot, electricity, and access to the employee restroom. Every morning, I was the first one in the warehouse. Every night, I was the last to leave the office, heading straight to the back lot, where my camper sat in the dark. But my heart had never felt brighter. Over time, I stopped being the helper. I learned how to operate the machines, understood the inventory system, and mastered efficient shipping. I took notes on everything, proactively suggested small improvements to increase productivity. Gradually, people at the company started remembering my name, not out of pity, but because they saw I earned it. After 10 months, I was promoted to team lead of the inventory group. I could hardly believe it when the director handed me the decision. I still remember what he said. "Someone like you. If you didn't break after everything you've been through, then nothing in this world can ever beat you." 1 year after getting the job, I held the keys to the first house I had ever owned. A 3-bedroom home in the outskirts of New Berlin, just a 10-minute drive from work. Not big, not fancy, but it was mine, earned completely by me. I parked the familiar camper in the backyard and stared at it under the sunset. It had once been a temporary shelter, now a memory, proof that I didn't give up. And then, in a stupid moment, I posted a picture of the new house on social media. A few days later, the old nightmare came knocking. I should have known. I should have stayed quiet. Just one photo of the new house, one short caption on Facebook. Finally, after all these years, I have a place to call home. And just 3 days later, the doorbell rang loudly in the middle of Sunday afternoon. When I opened the door, I froze. My parents, Dan, the golden boy little brother, and Sil, his wife who always treated me like a rag under her feet, were standing right there on my porch, holding their youngest child, with the other 3 clinging to their legs like hungry kittens. "Amelia, oh my God, this house is so cute," my mom squealed, her eyes scanning the living room. And without waiting for an invitation, she and the rest of them walked right in like it had always been their property. Sil smirked, her eyes scrutinizing every corner of the house. I knew that look. The kind someone gives when they're sizing up how they'd arrange furniture in a place that isn't theirs. I hadn't even had time to ask how they found the address when Dan patted my shoulder. Sugar sweet. "Hey sis, we were thinking, maybe you could move back into the camper for a while and we could stay in the house. You're living alone, and we've got 4 kids. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. "Are you serious, Dan? This is my house. I just bought it with money I earned. What are you people thinking?" My mom cut in, her voice soft like she was soothing a child. "You're living alone, 3 bedrooms is such a waste. Dan and the kids are all cramped in our place. You used to live in the camper, remember? It was fine then." Sil curled her lips. "What's the difference? You're used to living like that anyway. Plus, this place is close to Dan's job. Super convenient." I stood in the middle of the living room, heart pounding, trying to stay calm. "No. This is my house. I lived like a stray dog for 2 years to get this. No one gets to show up and tell me to move out." Dan's tone changed, the sweetness gone. "You're so selfish, Amelia. When you needed us, we were still there. Now we need something and you won't give anything back?" "When I needed you? When I knocked on your door that winter night with the camper? Who turned me away? Who laughed in my face and called me a failure? Now that I finally have a house, suddenly I'm supposed to share?" No one said anything, not one person could argue back. My mother started her usual act, crocodile tears, a choked-up voice. "It breaks my heart to see you so cold to your own family. Can't you do just a little something for Dan? I exhaled sharply and turned toward the door. Get out of my house, right now. Sil stepped forward, eyes blazing. You're really kicking your own family out? You lived like a damn dog for years and now you've got a little house and think you're better than everyone? I don't think I'm better. But I don't owe any of you a damn thing. And then, without warning, without hesitation, Sil lunged and slapped me across the face. I stumbled, my back hitting the edge of the table. In the daze, I saw Dan holding her back as she thrashed and screamed like she'd lost her mind. I quietly pulled out my phone and hit record. If you're not out of my house in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. Silence. No one dared take another step. I looked at my mother. You used to say I was a burden. Now that I have a house, suddenly I'm a bank. Do you even realize how disgusting that is? My father pulled my mother out. Dan's face was bright red as he backed away carrying his child, Sil still screaming and cursing, but silenced by a shout from my dad. Before they left, my mother turned back and whispered, "You'll regret this. One day you'll need your family again." I simply replied, "I've lived without you all for years, trust me, I won't need you again." The door slammed shut. And for the first time in years, I didn't shake after standing up to them. As soon as the sound of Dan's tires faded down the street, I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and collapsed onto the couch. My face was still burning from Sil's slap, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the rage boiling inside me. With trembling hands, I opened the video I had recorded. The footage was clear, the audio was crisp. Sil's shameless face, my mother's screeching voice, Dan's entitled demands. Everything was captured on this little phone. No. I wouldn't let them spin the story again. Not this time. I opened my laptop, pulled up social media. My hands shook as I typed the first line. But the more I wrote, the more I felt myself reclaiming the power they'd crushed in me since childhood. This is the truth about how my parents, my brother Dan and his wife Sil, showed up at my house and tried to take my property, baldly and violently. I recounted every detail, leaving nothing out. I attached the video, the moment Sil lunged and slapped me, my mother saying, "Do it for Dan," and Dan's cold face as he said, "You don't need to pay rent." It was all right there. I posted it at 8 p.m. By 9 p.m. my phone was buzzing non-stop. Messages. Calls. Comments. I didn't know how explosive the post would be, but clearly, neither did my family. That night, my cousin Lisa messaged first. "Oh my God, Amelia, are you serious? Is that real? I just watched the video, I'm shaking with anger." I replied, "You think I could make that up?" And then the messages came pouring in. Aunts, uncles, distant relatives I never thought would speak up, all sent messages of support. "You've been through too much, Amelia. I knew your parents favored Dan, but I didn't realize they'd go this far. You did the right thing, no one has the right to take away what you earned." One of the first to share the post was my aunt, my mother's younger sister, the one my mom despises because she's always been fair. She wrote a sentence that made me cry. "Never let anyone steal what you bled and cried to build. I'm proud of you, Amelia." I knew my mother wouldn't stay silent, and sure enough, the next morning she posted a message full of sweet lies. Unheartbroken that my daughter would shame her family over a small misunderstanding, we were only trying to help her brother, a hardworking man with 4 small kids. But that post sank in a storm of backlash. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone had heard the audio. There was no way for them to clean up this mess. Dozens of comments refuted her directly under the post, most from people who had stayed quiet for years. "You call that helping? Looked like trying to take over to me. Good thing Amelia had proof, otherwise you'd still be manipulating, like always." Dan chose silence, no excuses. No apology. Sil did exactly what I expected, she deleted all her social media. On the 3rd day, someone I never expected, Uncle Matthew, called me. He's my dad's older brother, the one who always kept his distance during family gatherings. His voice was deep but firm. "I saw everything. If you need a lawyer, just say the word. I know a few good ones." I nearly choked up. I didn't think you'd take my side. You were wrong. I stayed silent for too long. But this time, I can't. I sat in front of my computer, looking at the post that had been shared nearly 4,000 times. The messages kept coming. But the most important thing wasn't the attention. It was that I had finally found my voice. For the first time in years, I felt not alone. And more than anything, I knew this time they wouldn't dare come back so easily. I thought that after I exposed everything, they'd be too ashamed to show their faces. I was too naive. A week later, on Saturday morning, I came home from yoga and froze when I saw a U-Haul truck parked right in front of my house. Dane was struggling to pull a sofa toward the front door, while Sil stood in the yard, hands on her hips, glaring at me like she'd just been appointed homeowner by the president himself. I slammed the brakes. My heart thundered in my chest. "What the hell are you doing here?" I screamed, throwing open the car door. Dan looked at me, completely unfazed, as if this were all perfectly normal. "We're moving in, Amelia. You know this house is way too big for one person." Sil cut in, her voice sharp and high-pitched. "Exactly. And since Mom said you'd do the right thing, we decided to go ahead before you changed your mind." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You people are insane. This is my house. Who gave you the right?" Dan pulled out a stack of papers, waving them in front of me like some cheap magic trick. "We have a lease agreement, legal, signed by you." I snatched it out of his hand. One glance was all I needed. That signature wasn't mine, not even a bad copy. It was blatant forgery. I was speechless for a few seconds. My whole body trembled with rage. "You forged documents? Don't mess with me." I immediately pulled out my phone, started recording the whole scene, then dialed 911. Sil started to panic, rushing over and banging on my car window. "No, you can't do that, Amelia. We have little kids. You're tearing apart a family." I clenched my jaw, leaving the call on speaker. "If you touch my car again, I'll add vandalism to the list." When the police arrived, I explained everything: the previous video, the social media post, the fake lease with the forged signature. A young officer frowned, holding up the document. "You're saying you didn't sign this?" "Absolutely not. I even have video of their last visit. No one mentioned anything about a lease." I provided examples of my actual signature. The difference was obvious. Undeniable. Dan stood frozen like a statue. Sil began crying, wailing about how cruel and heartless I was. But her words carried no weight, not with the officers, and especially not with the security camera I had installed just last week. I pointed at the newly changed lock. "Check this out. They replaced my front door lock, left the old one in the drill bits right there on the porch. That's forced entry." The older officer nearby nodded, his voice heavy. "We'll ask them to leave immediately. If they don't comply, you have every right to file charges for forgery and trespassing." Sil thrushed and shouted. "He's your brother, Amelia. How can you be so heartless?" I replied coldly. "I owe nothing to any of you, especially when you treat me like a walking AITA." After 2 chaotic hours, they were forced to load everything back into the truck. The police stood by until Dan threw the new house keys onto my lawn, and the whole crew drove off in fury. The very next morning, I changed all the locks. Then I posted a short message online. Some people don't understand boundaries, so they need to be taught by the law. This time the response from relatives was even stronger than before. No one defended my parents or Dan anymore. One cousin from San Diego commented, "Better this, we're done calling them family." "I'm so sorry, Amelia, but you stood up so fiercely." I knew then there would be no more full family Thanksgiving dinners. But that was a loss I was more than willing to accept. Because finally, I had protected what I worked for, and no one was ever going to take it from me again. I thought things ended the day the cops kicked them off my property. But turns out, that was just the opening act of a full-blown family tragedy. And the most humiliating downfall of Dan? The once beloved golden child. It all started a few months after the break-in. I got a strange message from an anonymous account. Just one sentence. "Did you know Syl's youngest isn't Dan's?" I nearly dropped my phone. My first reaction wasn't shock, it was amusement. So much so that I had to sit down and laugh in disbelief. Then the rumor spread like wildfire. Soon everyone in the extended family was whispering, while Syl stayed completely silent online. A silence that spoke volumes. Until finally Dan, the man who once looked me dead in the eye and demanded I do the right thing, broke his silence. He held a small family meeting and revealed the DNA test results. The first 3 kids were his, but the youngest, a 6-month-old baby girl, had no biological connection to him at all. The atmosphere at the family meeting froze over like ice. I wasn't there, but I heard that Dan slammed the DNA test results down on the table and said, "I was a fool who trusted the wrong person. And I'm going to make it right." Syl denied everything at first, cried, blamed it all on a moment of weakness. But Dan wasn't the clueless guy he used to be. He had gathered evidence, texts, bank records, even footage from the doorbell camera, proving Syl had been cheating for nearly a year. I heard my parents stayed completely silent during that meeting. Maybe the shock hit harder than even the public disgrace of the house incident. Dan filed for divorce immediately, since Syl had a prior assault record. From the time she hit me, now officially documented, Dan was granted custody of the 3 kids. Syl lost primary custody, and was only allowed supervised visits. On the day of the court hearing, Syl showed up alone. The man she had cheated with? Disappeared. Rumor had it, he blocked her number and all social media. By the end of the trial, Syl had lost not only her husband and her children, but was also fined for violating the conditions of her bail related to the earlier assault. She was held in jail for 3 days, and just like that, the name Sylvia Monroe now had an additional line in the public record. Domestic violence conviction. Afterward, Syl moved back in with her parents in a small town about 2 hours away. On social media, she started posting long, drawn-out rants about how life is unfair, women are mistreated, and how she had been stripped of everything. But no one cared anymore. The people who used to comment with sympathy slowly disappeared. Relatives who once trusted her started blocking her outright. One time, I came across one of her posts by accident. A blurry photo of a messy living room with a tearful caption underneath. "If only people knew I never had a choice." I just smiled. She did have a choice. But she chose to hurt others, and now she wanted pity. Dan, meanwhile, remained silent online. No posts, no comments. But a few months later, I received a message from him. "Amelia, I'm sorry for everything I did." I didn't reply. Not out of hatred, but because I needed time. After all, those 3 children weren't at fault. And whether I liked it or not, Dan was still my brother. The downfall of Syl and Dan didn't bring me joy. But it gave me something. The confirmation that, despite being pushed aside for years, I had lived with integrity, and come out stronger than ever. I don't know what made them change. Maybe it was Dan's crash and burn. Maybe it was when the whole family turned their backs, and they experienced for the first time, complete isolation. One afternoon in June, I was planting more lavender in the corner of my yard when my mother showed up. She stood at the white picket fence, wearing a simple long dress, no longer the woman with bright red lipstick and eyes sharp as razors. She called out softly, "Amelia." I looked up. "What do you need?" She bowed her head, her eyes red. "I'm sorry, for everything." I was stunned. In all of my 34 years, it was the first time she had ever said those 2 words to me. A few days later, my parents came over, this time by my invitation. No more commands, no more arrogance. They sat at my dinner table like 2 worn-out people who'd just been through a storm. My father, the man who once yelled at me like I was a beggar, slowly spoke. "We were wrong. Wrong for spoiling Dan. Wrong for expecting you to sacrifice without complaint." My mother nodded, quietly wiping away tears. "We were narcissists," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't see that you were drowning." They told me that after everything, they started going to church. They met a young pastor, one who didn't lecture or judge, but asked them only one question. When was the last time you truly listened to your daughter? I didn't forgive them right away. But I listened. I wanted to see if this was just a performance for redemption, or a real awakening. As for Dan, he was quieter now. No more inflated ego, no more wife to lean on, no more defenders. He moved into the old camper, the same one I had once slept in during countless freezing nights in the Walmart parking lot. He asked to borrow it because his 3 kids needed a proper place to sleep, and he wanted to give the main bedroom to his eldest son, who was now a teenager. I didn't say much, just nodded. Don't mess it up, Dan, that camper kept me alive for a whole year. He didn't reply, but I saw it in those once arrogant eyes, now filled with quiet gratitude and genuine remorse. My life, finally, was on the path I had always dreamed of. The 3-bedroom house wasn't just a home anymore, it became a haven for true friends. I rented out the extra 2 rooms to my best friends Emily, a music teacher, and Laura, a librarian recently divorced. We lived together like a little chosen family, warm, joyful. Friday nights were movie night, complete with popcorn, pizza, and so much laughter we couldn't breathe. No one here was jealous. No one made me give up my bed. No one called me a burden. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was chosen, not obligated. On social media, I shared my story, not for revenge, but to let others who were overlooked by their families know, you deserve happiness, even if you have to start from zero. Relatives slowly began reaching out again. Those who once believed Syl's lies, who once doubted me, started sending apologies. Some came to my house, bringing apple pie, flowers, or just a hug full of regret. My Aunt Nancy, the one who once told me, "Don't stir up family drama," hugged me for a long time and said, "You're stronger than anyone in this family, Amelia." And now, the whole family knows it. I still haven't completely forgiven, but I gave them, all of them, a chance. And most importantly, I no longer live to please anyone. I live for me. I wasn't surprised when one morning I walked outside and found my Subaru covered in raw eggs. Broken shells, gooey whites and yolks smeared across the windshield and hood. The stench spread quickly in the hot sun. The sight was both pathetic and ironic. I knew exactly who did it. No one else, but Syl. She thought throwing eggs would make me snap, lose control like she had that day in my front yard. But all I did was take out my phone, snap a photo, give a faint smile, and drive the car to the car wash. Oh, I didn't post it online, I didn't call the police, I didn't confront her. I simply didn't care. Syl can hate me. She can blame the world for everything that happened. But I no longer live in her world. I've stepped into a new chapter. Ever since Dan was granted custody of the kids after the divorce, I'd watched him change, bit by bit. The arrogance, the entitlement, the irresponsibility, gone. In their place was a man who looked confused, anxious, and genuinely trying. I saw him taking the kids to school every morning, patiently waiting while they picked out clothes, tied their shoes, packed their lunches. He didn't yell anymore. He didn't blame others. Every time he saw me, Dan just gave a small nod, his silent way of saying thank you. I still kept my house, still tended my garden, still hosted backyard BBQ nights with friends. And most importantly, I held on to my inner peace. I no longer held hatred. I used to think I'd never get over the anger. Toward my parents, toward Dan, toward Syl, and even toward myself for staying silent so long. But one day, as I sat watching old recordings, videos of shouting, insults, violence, I just felt tired. I didn't want to carry it all anymore. I didn't need revenge to prove anything. The peace I now lived in, that was already the clearest victory. And then, something I didn't expect happened. I began to feel love for my nieces and nephew. At first I kept my distance. I was afraid I'd grow too attached and end up getting pulled back into family manipulation. But those kids, they were just young souls, needing a safe place. One Saturday evening, Dan brought them over for pizza. The youngest, Ellie, hugged me tightly and whispered, "Aunt Amelia, I like your house. It feels warmer than ours." I pulled her into my arms. My heart melted. Slowly I learned to open my heart again, but this time, only to those who deserved it. To innocent children who knew nothing of the mistakes the adults had made. To the friends who had always stood by me. Not for gain. Not because of blood. And to myself, the woman who was once thrown to the curb, who slept in a camper through winter nights, who was insulted by her own flesh and blood. I don't know if my parents have truly changed for good, or if Dan will always be a good father, or if Sil will try to cause trouble again. Life never gives guarantees. But I do know this. I survived. I stood up, and I will never let anyone define my worth again. That night, after cleaning up the backyard from a small gathering, I sat alone under the warm glow of the patio light, holding a cup of hot tea, listening to the distant chirping of crickets. The sky was full of stars. The breeze was gentle. And for the first time in many years, I felt truly free. If someone asked me if I regretted losing a family like that, I would smile and answer, no, because in the end, I built a family I chose. My story isn't just about the journey from pain to freedom, it's proof that you don't have to accept toxic relationships just because they're family. I learned to stand up on my own, rebuild my life from scratch, and find peace in the home I created for myself. A real family isn't a place where you feel small or used. It's where you're respected, loved, and free to be yourself. And I chose that. For me. What do you think about Amelia's journey and the choices she made? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more powerful real-life stories and meaningful lessons about family, love, and self-worth.